Okay, I make that 7:30 our time in the evening. So welcome everybody to our session on how resource lists support online learning. We will introduce ourselves in just a moment. And after that, we're going to explore some of the drivers and approaches. We're going to look at how resource lists have supported our own faculty goals, how they've driven usage and student engagement, and finally, how they can help us demonstrate value. So my name is James Hodgkin, and I lead the library at the University of Gloucestershire. We were founded as an educational institute back in 1847, but we actually only became a university in 2001. So we're relatively new. We've got about 10,000 students. That makes us small in UK higher education terms. We're very much teaching led, we're student centered, so we build personalized support into every step of our students' learning journey. Very small research profile, but actually that research that we do, 50% of it is classified as world leading or internationally excellent. We've got 3 campuses of roughly equal size across Cheltenham and Gloucester. And the library a couple of years ago actually merged with our IT colleagues. So now we have a single customer service offer. So I'm going to hand over to Louise, who can introduce herself.
Hi everybody, I'm Louise from the University of Oxford. Oxford is a world-leading research university with 100 academic departments, 39 independent colleges and 6 private halls, and around 24,000 students. The university's library service is the Bodleian Libraries, named after our founder, Sir Thomas Bodley, who opened the library in 1602, and the service now comprises 27 sites. I'm responsible for library services to the Social Sciences Division, and I oversee a range of shared services in support of research and teaching, including our online Resourceless service, which is the focus of our talk today.
Let's start with a bit of context and what the UK higher education sector has been like in 2020. Well, obviously, the COVID-19 national lockdown started for us back in March, so that's had an enormous impact, and it precipitated a very rapid pivot to fully online teaching for a number of months. From a library perspective, that has provided some real challenges, obviously. Campuses were completely closed during this time, and students could not access library spaces or collections at all. There were gaps in essential reading. We found some things were not necessarily online. But the other side of that coin was there was a huge opening up of content from publishers to support the situation. This was obviously great, but it was a real challenge for us to curate that and communicate it to students in a meaningful way. There's been various surveys that have left us in no doubt that during this time, students really missed the library, our services, our facilities, and our resources, which in some ways was good to hear. There was a gradual reopening over the summer for all university libraries at different paces for different institutions, but there was very restricted library access at first, and a lot of us were relying on click and collect because we couldn't allow browsing of the collections, or scan and deliver for a more online service. Once we did start to reopen and once term began, most universities have adopted what we'd call a blended or a mixed model of teaching, so mostly online, but part of that on face-to-face. And this has really built a sense of community and helping to prevent isolation. It's giving a sense of normality to the students in a very abnormal time. So in this session, we're going to explain how resource lists have really helped us to support this rapid pivot, and actually have then gone on to provide a lot of other value over the last few years. But first, I'm going to hand over to Louise, who's going to just explain a little more about resource lists for those who are maybe less familiar with them.
Thanks. So Almost all taught courses at UK universities have resource lists, which are a carefully selected set of references to help guide and prioritise students' reading around the topic. The resource list draws on library and open access resources, and they also help drive the acquisition activities of libraries. And any one university can have thousands of resource lists. An online resource list management system helps us manage the process from resource list creation by bookmarking resources in the library catalogue and from the web, or by importing bookmarks from reference management tools, or adding them manually and then organising reading list sections. Importance level for the reference can be set, and requests can be placed for extracts to be scanned. Links to the full text and library catalogue records are captured in the bookmarking process. And this slide shows a screenshot of an online reference for which students can track their reading intentions and add personal notes. Resource lists are embedded through LTI integration into the virtual learning environment, and these lists can be set as private, or academics can individually choose to make their resource lists public as open educational resources, subject to any Creative Commons license they wish to apply.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about our drivers and approaches and possibly some of our successes. So in 2016, Oxford approved its education IT strategy, and the aim of that was to adopt the very best of teaching innovations made possible by digital technology. And a focus on digital was very much at the centre of the Bodleian Libraries' own strategic plan. These strategies aim to increase support for flexible teaching and inclusive learning, making collections of resources more accessible and relevant to students, improving the functionality and usability of those key digital platforms, and increasing investment in online content. Louise put together a business case to secure funding for an online resource list management system, which was structured around the concept of learn, teach, and enable. For students, Oxford wanted to provide them with a comprehensive online source of linked reading lists, delivering a common and enhanced student experience in an accessible environment. For academics, the aim was to provide system capabilities for them to easily build, structure, annotate, format, and share their reading lists and receive analytics on reading list engagement to inform teaching practice. And for librarians, it was to improve library processes for tracking and provisioning reading lists and optimising the investment made in those library materials. At Gloucestershire, like Oxford, resource lists are part of a much wider teaching and learning remit. It has now moved into a learning design programme as we work on the quality of the lists rather than merely the quantity. We both chose Talis Aspire as part of a wider technology landscape, but this was a people project rather than just IT. We brought academics, administrators, learning technologists, librarians, and students closer together. We both expect to have around 2,000 resource lists available for the current academic year. And here's some of the feedback we've been receiving.
So whenever the Bodleian Libraries introduces a new tool or makes significant changes to an existing service, we undertake a programme of usability testing and we follow up with user experience evaluation. So for our online resource list tool, we commissioned at the end of our pilot phase in early 2019, a third-party consultant to undertake some surveys, focus groups and interviews. And the two graphs on the slide show a couple of headlines from that assessment, namely that 93% of the students wanted their faculty to continue using the online resource list tool, and 87% of academics were either very likely or likely to continue using the resource list service. The user assessment, together with an early adopters stories event we held for advocacy purposes, also shone a light on the relationship with teaching. The main benefit of the Resourceless tool, as identified by academics, related to its dynamic nature and the ease by which new references and resources could be disseminated as topics came up in group discussion or were recommended by the students. And this fits really well with the Oxford personalised model of education that focuses on the individual, promotes a strong tutor relationship, and adapts to individual needs. There were also multiple examples of how the functionality provided by the tool afforded pedagogical advantages. So the note function is used to provide a steer on how to approach the reading, to make connections with previous or upcoming classes, and to put the paper or author in context. The bookmarking tool makes it easy to capture resources on the go for reading list improvements or to add newly published items in fast-moving areas. The links to the full text resources mean that students are easily able to access them, and it makes group discussion easier. And also the ability to link to the range of materials has provided new focus on adding audio-visual resources. And just speaking generally, engagement in the process helped keep academics closer to the readings they were setting and their lectures. For the students, the main benefits identified were the one-click links from the reference through to the resource and having most of the resources available online. And these themes are mirrored in the student feedback at Gloucestershire.
The move to... Oh, sorry, apologies.
So sorry, James. I also just wanted to mention that we also had a dedicated evaluation workstream for accessibility, and we held in-depth interviews with disabled students to verify the suitability of our service for inclusive teaching practice. And this work did confirm that our service had a positive impact in reducing barriers, particularly by providing a consistent platform and format for accessing reading lists and easing the path to bibliographic research by providing availability, online links, and digitized content. So by putting our lists in an online resource list system, we are mainstreaming reasonable adjustments into university provision. Thanks.
The move to a blended or a mixed model of teaching has meant that the virtual learning environment is taking on ever more importance. I describe it as being at the centre of the student universe, and Resourceless support those faculty goals of all learning material being available online within a structured module page. Academics are able to clearly explain the significance and the context of that week's or that topic's learning resources and use that as a preparation for the seminar and the face-to-face learning to come. It also has the benefits of flexibility and accessibility, and it fits with the distance learners that we're increasingly seeing at Gloucestershire. Equally, the Resourceless system is supporting library departmental goals via the data that can illustrate the demand across multiple modules for the same resources or gaps in essential reading, like I mentioned earlier on. And an automated review process can speed up those purchase decisions from the moment a resource is identified as essential by an academic, while maintaining that required level of library mediation. Well, we can't exactly isolate the influence of Resourceless on usage. We do believe it must have be a significant factor. Those figures are for Gloucestershire over the last 3 years, so you can see ebook usage has really shot up for us, and students' experience with the online resources is significantly enhanced. And this, what we believe the students are experiencing is mirrored by the feedback that Louise just mentioned. So this idea of one click into the resources, consistency of presentation, something that's embedded into the VLE where the students spend a lot of their time, structured lists by topic or by week, the ability for the academic to explain why that reading is relevant and important, and the fact that it's always available and even interactive. The students are able to provide their own reading intentions in terms of something they must read or want to read later. There's now a simplified and fully integrated process for requesting copyright cleared scans within the system. Use of this service we found has tripled since introducing the TALIS system, and it provides the clear benefits that I mentioned here. So value for money, supporting online teaching by potentially turning those print resources into a scan and putting it online, and obviously then that accessibility. Finally, both our institutions aim to open up the type of resources available. We believe students are going to be much more engaged with a wide range of formats and even a wide range of creators. Gloucestershire is seeing increasing levels of librarian input into the lists and even some student-led lists as a form of assessment. So far, we've made this sound all like a bed of roses and very positive, but there is an awful lot of hard work required. So I'll hand over to Louise.
Thanks, James. Yeah, at this point, I'd like to stress that implementing and using an online resourceless system does take a lot of staff resource. And this slide outlines just some of the factors involved in our 4-tier support framework for the service at Oxford. And now we are running our resourceless service at scale. We're in the process of appointing an online reading list coordinator to keep the momentum going. The initial hump of data entry work is a particular barrier to academics adopting the system, and we have had to assign considerable library or admin staff resource to remove that particular pain point where we can. And there's also a significant training load, as using the system is not immediately straightforward, and we are providing yet another platform for busy academics to engage with. At Oxford, we found that only 15% of our academics were keen to use the system, and 26% didn't touch the system at all. It was mediated for them. So effective advocacy activities and the identification of champions for the benefits of the tool are really important. In terms of setting strategic direction and priorities for the service, we have a steering committee at Oxford, which I chair, and that brings together a range of stakeholders. And then we have a fantastic operations group that makes sure the work gets done.
We wanted to just mention how Resourceless can support the library in demonstrating value. We now have full access to the data that TALIS Aspire gives us, and this opens up previously unattainable levels of insight into the student engagement with our learning resources. This can be used to demonstrate the value for money we're getting from our resources, the variations in student engagement across faculties, or, as we have been involved in for a number of years, feeding that data directly into a complete learning analytics system. This takes library usage data and puts it at the heart of their student support and intervention process. And taking that on one step further, we're also starting to visualize individual resource list usage to a very detailed level, so academics can understand how students are engaging and potentially adjust their approaches accordingly. So what's next with resource lists? Well, they're going to continue to develop as a teaching and learning tool, I believe. Gloucestershire are piloting something called TALIS Elevate, and this enables academics and students to interact at a far deeper level with the learning resource, highlighting sections, having a discussion with their cohort. Academics can set tasks or ask questions relating to specific sections of a journal, a video, or even an image. as part of our pilot, an example is 17 students who are on an ecology module and have already generated over 400 comments within their resource lists this academic year. So I'll just leave it to Louise to wrap up, and then we'll take some questions.
Thanks, James. So really, to answer our question then, how are libraries successfully using Resourceless to support online learning? Well, James and I would make the following points. We're using online resource lists to support flexible and inclusive education. By flexible learning, we mean accommodating students' needs for when, where, and how they study, even as conditions change. And inclusive teaching, which recognises and minimises the barriers that could hinder students' learning and participation. They've also helped facilitate our pivot to online teaching and learning. Students can filter their resource lists to view online resources only, and the format of the online lists encourages good use of different types of online resource. We feel they improve the student experience with anytime, anywhere access, and optimizes the investment made in library collections, particularly because we're driving engagement through embedding the content in the VLE course pages. With stress that it requires significant staff resources, so be clear about your goals should you decide to pilot an online resource list system. And as James outlined, they generate analytics. And this is particularly helpful, I feel, if you've got good sources of institutional data to mesh with, like a course hierarchy and granularity in your sign-on mechanism. And then overall, it strengthens library collaboration with the university by virtue of all using the same system and embedding the library's role more firmly within the teaching and learning interaction, and really providing high quality resources to meet students' expectations of an outstanding learning experience. So thank you all very much for listening. And we're now going to close down our slides and see if we have any questions.
Okay, I'm just having a look. I'm having a look in the Zoom chat here, as well as on the actual conference site. So I'm just reading one here. Have we seen interactions with faculty and students shift throughout COVID? Do faculty recommendations for materials hold weight, or do they hold more weight in this COVID environment?
We've certainly done considerable reviews of resource lists during COVID-19 to really maximise use of online resources that can be accessed remotely. We've also increased the amount of copyright cleared scans that we've done. And during COVID-19 lockdown, the publishers opened up a lot of content, albeit on a temporary time-limited basis. And where we could, we did embed links within our Oxford Reading Lists Online, ORLO, lists to really help make use of that content.
We're getting lots of questions in now. I see, can we see an example? I presume that means, can we see an example of a list? We did put one in one of our earlier slides, but yeah, I'm sure we could do something in terms of putting something else into our slides if they're going to be shared later. Let's have a look. How do reading lists impact library acquisitions? Our experience is they're starting to impact more and more. I think the data that you can get, we really leaned on the consistency of being able to name reading as essential as an example, to then report on that and see what of that was not online during lockdown. And that was invaluable in terms of identifying where potentially our gaps were, and the review process whereby an academic putting an item onto a list can begin an automated process where that book can be bought straight away. And I know some institutions do that. The items are just purchased, unmediated, or it goes to the library team and they can kind of make a final decision on that. So it's got a lot of back-end benefits to it, as well as all the student-facing and academic-facing benefits.
Yeah, ditto for Oxford.
Yeah. Let me see any more questions. So is there a way manually add to your VLE, or is there a way to automate that process in Talis?
Yeah, I think that comes with whether you've got a course hierarchy, because we're struggling a little bit in Oxford because we don't have a sort of single source of truth for all of our course data, which means that the course convener or the administrator needs to just use a little kind of link to pull that ORLO reading list, our online reading list, and connect it to the VLE course page. And because we do an annual rollover process, that needs to happen each year, because we archive the lists so that a particular cohort can go back to the list from their particular year of engagement on their course. So we do need to check manually that each list is linked through to the VLE, but we are working on automating and refining that process. How is it at Gloucestershire, James?
Yeah, incredibly similar, actually. It's exactly what we're finding. It's about refining. It doesn't work first time, that's for sure. I've just seen a really interesting question here about probably going on to the analytics side of things, which is something I've been involved in a lot, and the privacy issues. And I am aware, perhaps in the US, there's a lot more concern over privacy and understanding what students are reading. And certainly wider reading is something that we are very aware we don't want to go close to in terms of what students are reading and when they're reading it. I think you could make an argument that it's different for resource lists. That is something that has been set for the module, its specific module reading, and understanding how students are interacting with that is valuable for many, many reasons. So that would be the argument for it, but I understand some librarians are very worried about privacy and knowing too much about what students read and when they read it. So it's a live issue for us, but I do think you can make a distinction between wider reading and resource list reading, for example.
There's a question here just saying, what platform do you use?
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's referring to the VLE or the Resourceless system, so I'll answer both. For the Resourceless system, we use Talis Aspire. And in terms of our VLE at Oxford, we use Canvas. What's your VLE at Gloucestershire?
We use Moodle.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, and it's open source, so we kind of it's not hosted, it's on premises, and we do the modifications ourselves, but you can do either, I think. Okay, next question. We've implemented a reading list integration and have similar experiences. It does require a substantial bit of staff resource. It's clear we need to do and take advantage of our analytics. Yeah, it does take a lot of work. Don't be fooled. Our Vice Chancellor at our university thinks Talis is wonderful and is very supportive, which is great in one sense, but he also thinks that it will solve everything, and it only works if everyone engages with it. And a bad list on Talis is just a bad list. It needs the engagement of the academics to make them interesting. So yes, a lot of work there. Sorry, go on, Louise.
I was just going to read out the next one. Take it in turns. Do we have to get copyright permissions for articles? So wherever we can, we just link straight through to the eJournal article, and then that use gets recorded. If we don't have it online and we want to put a scanned copy of a printed article into the system, then on the whole, we do that under what's called our CLA license. In the UK, we have the Copyright Licensing Agency, and the institution pays a fee based on FTEs, And that enables us, for particular publishers, for particular works, and within certain limits, to make scans for teaching purposes. When we do a scan, we have to report it each year to the Copyright Licensing Agency, and there's a tool in Tallis that helps us generate the digital record form that we have to submit. So there is a certain amount of administration required, but it has been incredibly useful, particularly during lockdown, when we've not had such easy access to our print collections, and our Copyright Licensing Agency did relax some of the requirements, so we can copy a little bit more at the moment for a fixed term basis.
Yeah, that's right. I've got one here. What usage driving materials do you find most valuable in this new COVID environment? Not sure I understand that one. I don't know, Louise, if you have any idea about that one.
Is that one on Zoom or on Pathable?
Sorry, I've jumped across.
Are you whizzing about?
I am sorry, I'm whizzing about too much probably. Yeah, okay, let's go down to pain points you have experienced when using Resourceless. Yes, apart from the one we've just been talking about, which is workloads and the amount of effort that's required. I think we found an issue potentially when you roll lists over from one year to the other. This is very technical, but sometimes links break and things like that. So you have to be aware of how your virtual learning environment interacts with your reading list system, and make sure that we encourage our academics to embed their lists into the virtual learning environment so it's as seamless as possible. It appears like it's just part of that page, but I do know that sometimes those links can break, sometimes from one year to the next. So that's one thing that we've found a bit of pain with. So I'd recommend making sure that the two things interact very well. Louise, do you have any other painful moments?
I think in our first year, we certainly had a few citation and metadata issues to iron out.
Yep.
And the way in which we handled our catalogue entries, where we've got multiple Oxford libraries and different editions of the same work. And also just the sort of looking at the fact that the reading list isn't perhaps how an academic might like their bibliography here, and PDF, and they can put it in a particular citation style. Whether they were being set particular chapters or whole books. I think really there's just, I mean, you have that anyway if you had a paper environment or a PDF list posted up on a website somewhere. So there, you know, there were a few things to work through, I think. Yeah, and I think really trying to work at scale as well. When we set up our project initially, we wanted to make sure that the processes and the ways in which we approach things could be scaled up to work across the institution. So that's something to think about right at the start, to make sure that you understand all the responsibilities and the requirements and how you're going to resource them. Yeah,
completely agree. I don't think we've got any new questions coming in, and I know we are running over time and I don't want us to get cut off mid-flow. So I think unless anyone else has anything they really want to ask us, we will probably leave it there and say thank you everybody for attending. Not sure how many of you there were out there, but hopefully lots, and hopefully you've learned something. I say overall, it's been a really positive experience with Resourceless. I'd recommend going for it because there's a lot of benefits. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much for your attention and enjoy the rest of the conference. So it's bye from Oxford.
and bye from Cheltenham. Goodbye.